Okay, so thank you for the invitation, and I will be talking to you about shaping technological revolutions in turbulent times, and I will refer to the historical lessons from history. That's what will be the framework of what I will be saying. So I will cover 3 points: what is and is not a technological revolution. Then how do technological revolutions propagate and how are they shaped? And finally, I will take a look at the road ahead for China and the West and wonder if what we have ahead is a global golden age for the information revolution. So first of all, a revolutionary technology is not a technological revolution. What is a technological revolution? It is a set of interrelated and interdependent revolutionary technologies and technology systems, including new and dynamic products and industries, as well as a low-cost input, like now we have chips and data, and before we had oil, and before that steel, and before that coal, and so on. And a new infrastructure, like we now have internet, and before we had roads and electricity, and before that we had ships and transcontinental railways, etc., and so on. And it is also capable of reducing the cost and increasing the productivity of every single sector of the economy, leading to a complete paradigm shift, a complete shift in common sense for technology and for business and for the economy and even for organizations, and requiring a major reorganization of the whole socio-institutional framework. A revolutionary technology is a major scientific and technological breakthrough with the capacity to transform many sectors of the economy and society and of creating new technology systems. It follows and strengthens the paradigm of the prevailing revolution and acts as an integral part of it. I guess you have all guessed that I'm trying to distinguish the revolutionary technology that AI is from the information revolution to which it belongs. So each technological revolution involves several revolutionary technologies in powerful synergistic interdependency. So let's look, for instance, at plastics, a revolutionary technology with its many systems. So we have successive systems downstream, consumer durables, industrial supplies, all of those, plus successive technologies upstream, injection, compression, blow molding, everything to be able to use the plastics, and assembly, measuring and control instruments, lubricants, etc., etc. So basically, plastics was an incredible revolutionary technology that replaced all sorts of natural materials, and it really felt like a huge transformation. But all these systems and that particular revolutionary technology and various others were within the mass production revolution and strengthening its paradigm. So the previous revolution, the one that plastics belonged to, was the mass production revolution from 1913 with the moving assembly line to exhaustion in the 1970s. The whole of the stagflation we had in the 70s and all that is because that revolution was dead. It was spent, no more productivity, and that's why it had to globalize. Everybody got out of the countries where it was expensive, looking for low-cost labor or whatever, because they could no longer increase the productivity of mass production. So what did we have? We had mass production as a system, as a way of producing, and also continuous processing, plus oil refining and petrochemicals, and each of them with several systems and revolutionary technologies downstream and upstream. So the current information revolution is still exercising modernization and creative destruction on those systems and networks while creating new ones. So that was all consistent with itself. And then it just is now being transformed by another revolution, which is not yet well organized like that one. So why is it important to understand this? Because however crucial it is to guide artificial intelligence to the best social and economic outcomes, the effort can only succeed in the context of shaping and providing directionality to the whole information revolution, of which AI is an increasingly important and inextricable part. It is essential to the information revolution. So how do technological revolutions propagate and how are they shaped? We have 4 previous revolutions to learn from: the Industrial Revolution, the age of steam, coal, iron, and railways. Before that, the age of steel and heavy engineering, the first globalization. And, after that, then the age of the automobile, oil, petrochemicals, and mass production. They are all profoundly different, but their propagation has followed the same basic pattern. Their trajectory has been an S-curve with 2 contrasting periods. They, of course, this is the new revolution. It always coexists with the previous and coexists at the end with the next. So the first period is the installation period. The last one is the deployment period. And in between, there is something that I have called a turning point, which is the time when all the problems created by the installation period sort of come to the surface and become a problem. And the deployment period is like the solution to all those problems. So the installation period is a turbulent and unequal creative destruction time when the new destroys the old or modernizes it, but basically lots of industries disappear. There's rise and decline of industries, regions, and countries. Jobs and skills are gained and lost. Income polarization, the prosperity of the few, the desperation of the many. From financial creativity to financial casino. And major crashes along the way. But when we come to the deployment period, it's the golden age of creative construction. What does creative construction mean? Means that every single innovation brings more and more innovations upstream and downstream, because the new technology is already the common paradigm, and it is now diffusing comfortably, because that is what everybody understands as progress and as innovation. And that is because there is a proactive state promoting economic and social progress by setting up a win-win game between business and society. Further on, you'll understand better what I mean by that. Production reigns rather than finance, with clear dynamic demand and stable, reliable regulation. Dynamic demand is a very important concept that I will be talking about in a minute. So the turning point is a time of instability and uncertainty, political divisions, recessions, tensions, conflicts, resentment, populism. Do you recognize what we're going through now? That's exactly what I think. I think not only that we are there, but we might be coming to the end, and we might have ahead the golden age. I will talk about it in a minute. Social progress in capitalism requires shaping action by the state, even though many free marketeers will deny it. Income polarization is typical of free market installation periods and major bubble times. So what do we have? Here is the installation period and the turning point of mass production. Then we have deployment, the golden age of mass production. As you can see, this is the income earned by top 1% of taxpayers. It is high in installation periods, and it comes down in deployment. So we went from the top 1% having 20% of income to the bottom 50% getting the 20%. So this is the difference. So you can distinguish in terms of what happens to society, what a golden age is about. And of course, golden age deployment periods are more stable and inequality diminishes. We have three previous golden ages to learn from. The Victorian boom in mid-19th century, the Belle Epoque, progressive era in the US at the beginning of the 20th century, and the post-war golden age in mid-20th century. They are also profoundly different, but their nature is similar. What are golden ages about? They are about the perception and reality. Notice, it's the reality, but also that people feel it, of three advances. Social progress, resulting in social peace due to the constant improvement of a significant new portion of the population becoming a middle class. It's the feeling that there's a whole, that everybody's sort of moving up in social progress. Economic growth based on guaranteed and increasing dynamic demand. Dynamic demand, I will explain in a minute. For the core economic sectors with the new technologies. So the core economic sectors face demand that grows with them and on the multiplication of opportunities for business up and downstream, which is what I've called creative construction. Social justice. It's based on increasing rights for a greater proportion of the population and social trust in the fairness of the system. It's a feel-good time. People feel, in fact, the French call the post-war boom les 30 glorieuses, the glorious 30 years, because that's how it felt. Each time the advances have been achieved differently, of course, because they respond to the context, to the conditions left by installation, and to the nature of the paradigm. The issue of dynamic demand is crucial for golden ages. It is not just quantitative, like the Keynesian notion of aggregate demand, nor does it respond to J.B. Say's idea about supply creating its own demand. It doesn't exactly happen like that. It is demand that responds to the nature of the new technologies and grows at the same rhythm as the potential production capacity of the core industries of the technological revolution. So as long as there is increasing productivity, which is what the core industries provide, you can have increasing, you need to have increasing demand, which with whatever conditions will create demand for that particular set of industries that are growing, particularly with the new technologies. And that is enabled by implicit or explicit government policy again. So for the most recent golden age of the mass production revolution after World War II, dynamic demand came from two main directions in the West: suburbanization and the Cold War. The automobile created conditions which were not there before about the possibility of using cheap land, and people had the automobile to come in. So suburbia was a way of everybody having a cheap house on cheap land. So that guaranteed growing markets for mass-produced consumer goods and required, of course, the welfare state and public infrastructure. Whereas the Cold War needed to guarantee demand for military goods and for technological advance, which required public procurement and funding of science. While subsidized agriculture freed consumer demand for manufactured goods. If food was cheap, then you could buy manufactured goods with the rest. It also facilitated markets for farm machinery and petrochemicals. So how did the welfare state manage to intensify mass consumption, creating the good life for the middle class? Well, public infrastructure for suburbia eased construction of affordable homes requiring automobiles and electrical appliances. Public backing for mortgages made banks willing to lend to salaried workers to have mortgages and to have automobiles. Unemployment insurance assured continuity in credit and mortgage payments. Pensions allowed spending salaries without fear of old age. Supporting strong unions made salaries increase with productivity. The unions forced this, which was good for business, but they don't necessarily understand that that is so, and attained free time for leisure, shopping, and consumption. You really need time in order to be able to consume properly. Free education and health, provided wages and salaries, made wages and salaries only for mass consumption. They didn't have to pay education and health. Most, even all the way to university, it was free, not like now. Farm subsidies allowed cheap food, was freed income for other consumption, and decent farm profits enabled using petrochemicals. Don't forget that herbicide, pesticide, all those things were actually also oil derived. All that plus the Marshall Plan for Europe and the World Bank, which funded the road, electrical, and other infrastructure that enabled world demand. So there was also world demand, but the main thing was the national demand of, consumer national demand. Some revolutions thrive in national markets, others are globalizing. So here you can see, this is the post-war boom. This is under 20% of world exports and of GDP was exports and imports, whereas now and before, we had globalization. So globalized markets actually need world demand, whereas it so happens that mass production, because of its nature, required a lot of local, national, internal demand. So, and that's how, and it's visible how it happened. As soon as this revolution began spreading, internal demand became more important. And now we're on the opposite way. So the first globalization, which was the age of steel and heavy engineering, very much marked by the British Empire and the rise of many countries, the US, Germany, Japan, Sweden, etc. And now, of course, we have had an incredible globalization with China forging ahead and various other countries. And in the middle, we had this international rather than global world order with that age of mass production. So the ICT revolution is globalizing, and it is likely to require supranational arrangements. Right now, it looks impossible, but if we don't have it, it might be very difficult to have a golden age with the globalizing paradigm. So this time, an equivalent but different set of policies and institutions will be required. But now the new dynamic demand must be for capital goods and services, which is in the nature of this fifth revolution. China, however, is making the leap in both revolutions, the mass production and this one. So it must set up the institutions to foster dynamic demand in basic consumer goods and services too. So it needs to get dynamic demand in for the old and for the new. So what would be the road ahead for China and the West? Will it be a global golden age for the information revolution? Well, first of all, we have a problem. Today, China and the West are competing for their own insufficient markets. They have overproduction of things that they cannot consume themselves, and exports are not absorbing yet. It is markets for capital goods and services, metals, especially steel, but high-tech consumer goods, infrastructure projects, green tech, high-tech pharma, etc. Currently, it is a zero-sum game that could lead to extended conflict. Massive new growing markets are required. Friendshoring to favor the development of the global South is one evident way to achieve that. You can stimulate new and sufficient dynamic demand for the advanced countries, East and West. The opportunity is there to develop dynamic demand for all. Global energy, food, and resources for green development, enhancing the purchasing power of the global South, all that dynamic demand for high-level services and capital goods, AI, smart plants, green energy, biotech, microelectronics, new materials, etc., for both China and the West, and at the same time supporting ample domestic demand for goods and services. All that innovation is open as long as we are helping it to happen. China has stepped ahead with the Belt and Road Initiative and friendshoring investment. The West is beginning to follow, but neither seems to have taken on board the dynamic demand issue as a clear goal. Moving south, consumer goods assembly with lower cost labor plus rental and recycling. We should probably do rental. We can't have everybody in the world, every home in the world to have a refrigerator if we need to have to throw them out like we are doing now. So we need to do rental of long durable products, as well as processing minerals in situ next to the mine rather than doing all this traveling and 6 ships full of dirt rather than, but basically because we have local renewable energy and that would help help climate change not happen so soon. So all this could unleash development in the global south and generate increasing high-tech demand for the north. All countries must also enhance the domestic market for goods and services. That depends on salary levels, on free time to consume, and on the security of the welfare state, so you know you're secure for your old age and so on, including the salaries and the productivity of the services of the welfare state itself, of course, which is a very important part of how you generate consumer demand. The successful welfare state set up by the West for the mass production revolution is no longer adequate, whereas China is broadening its own and experimenting with various forms of adoption. And here, last I talk about AI can play a central role. The good life with mass production was about mass consumption of manufactured goods with waste as a form of market expansion. The good life with information technologies can be about optimal private and public services while protecting the planet. A whole new world of innovation in government and social services, health, education, longevity, food production, sustainability, etc., is ready to be created in all countries with the help of artificial intelligence. Processes of forging ahead to challenge the leader, as that of the United States and Germany surpassing Britain in the third revolution, involve making the leap with two revolutions, modernizing the old with the new one. That is precisely what China has done by upgrading mass production with the information revolution, robotics, and all the rest, and then advancing at the new frontier. Now, regarding the welfare state, it must also do both. It has been catching up and can now forge ahead, reaching towards the affordability of a new good green life for all, while guaranteeing dynamic consumer demand for producers. For the West, bringing the welfare state up to date is an emergency to overcome social unrest and confront populism. For China, establishing a universal welfare state is an essential complement of the successful forging ahead process. For all, it is an immense innovation opportunity. A peaceful global golden age is possible with social progress, economic growth, and social justice in North, South, East, and West, in a safe and healthy planet. To get there, history is a useful guide. Thank you.